Maybe they're arming against bad healthcare. There you go. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may by session of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislator of the state in which the same shall be for the election of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. And this is the last one. To make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States. That's it. Maybe I'm missing something. There's nothing on healthcare. Now, some people, I know the other side's argument. Some people will say that first clause says it. To pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Now, there's a couple ways I can go about this. That power, that sentence says the power to lay and collect taxes to pay the debts. So that only power is to collect taxes to promote the general welfare. And the only way they can promote the general welfare is through the enumerated powers that I just laid out for you. Some like to argue that that means Congress can promote the general welfare and it can expand beyond the enumerated powers. If that's the case, then why do they have the enumerated powers? Why would they lay them all out? Why would they see, if you study the history of the Constitution, you realize that they were trying to create a limited government with very specific powers, because they knew that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and they didn't want the government overreaching, especially in terms of the states. They wanted the federal government to have limited powers and the rest of the powers to go to the states, was the main argument. And James Madison, who many saw as the father of the Constitution, talked about this. At the time the Constitution was adopted, some interpreted the clause as granting Congress. By the way, I got this from website, and the bibliography credits to the a couple of constitutional scholars, but I got this actually from answers.com. But I have done studies on James Madison, and I know he was mainly one of the fathers of the Constitution, and he mainly believed in a limited government. And he wanted specific powers. And it says right here, at the time the Constitution was adopted, some interpreted the clause as granting Congress a broad power and to pass legislation as it pleased, so long as the asserted purpose was promotion of the general welfare. One of the Congress founding fathers, James Madison, objected to this reading of the clause, arguing that it was inconsistent with the concept of the enumerated powers granted Congress no additional powers other than those enumerated. Thus, in their view, the words themselves have no practical purpose. So James Madison, now it later says that Alexander Hamilton was one of the founders who believed in expanding it. But if you know anything about Alexander Hamilton, is he had very small role in creating the Constitution. He was not there very long. James Madison and others had a big role. And the main argument was they wanted a government to be small, to have limited powers, so the states and the local governments had the power. So they created a constitution that enumerated specific powers to Congress, which I just laid out. And that first sentence, even though it talks about the general welfare, it only says they can collect taxes for the general welfare. They cannot, they can collect taxes to provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But if that is the case, then why even write all the other enumerated powers? The general welfare, which the definition means the well-being, it was talking about the general welfare, the health of the nation, not providing certain quality services or goods to a specific part of the population. It was talked about providing for the whole nation. If you study the Constitution, you study its history, and you read the Constitution, There is nothing in here that gives the power for the federal government to have any control over healthcare. None. But this has been going on for a while. Slowly but surely, as the people do not pay attention, Congress grabs more and more power. Now, if they want to make an amendment to the Constitution providing for a healthcare bill, then fine. That's within their power. But notice that they're not doing that. They're not doing that because they know it won't pass. They know the states are not going to ratify any type of nationalized health care. It will not pass. So what are they doing? Well, they're basically just throwing out the powers given to them in the Constitution. I mean, have you seen the actual Constitution? It's an old paper and you can barely read it. I mean, why don't we just forget it and just do our own thing? We have to make a choice, ladies and gentlemen. Are we going to be a nation that respects our founding? Are we going to be a nation in which we only use the powers granted in the Constitution, the enumerated powers, which this is not just healthcare. This has been going on for a while. We've allowed the government to grab too much power because we think, oh, it's for the good. Oh, they're not going to overstep their bounds. But slowly but surely, they've gotten their foot in the door and they're providing more and more. And then, as Ronald Reagan said, one day we are going to wake up and our children are going to wonder what it was like to live in a nation that was free. Well, if you think I'm overstating it, or if you have a better argument, send me an instant message at Radio WNSC. If not, well, I don't know, get your own show. You were listening to the Michael Yaffee program, wnsc.ucf.edu online radio. And I'm just going to mention one more thing. I mentioned this before, but I'm just going to mention one more thing in terms of healthcare. And I'm going to talk about one of our founding fathers, Patrick Henry. And Patrick Henry is famous for making a speech at the Virginia House of Burgesses to the delegates. See, he understood during the Revolution, right at the beginning of the Revolutionary War, that war with Britain was inevitable. There were some in Virginia that did not want to pay for the militias to fight against the British. Instead, they wanted to negotiate with the British. Patrick Henry understood that in order to negotiate with the British of the time, they would have to give up some of their liberties. They would have to give up some of what they were fighting for. Some of the delegates were okay with that because they cried, peace. I just want peace. And Patrick Henry said, some will cry peace, but I already know the choice I've made. And he said, give me liberty or give me death. See, what Patrick Henry understood then is that liberty is the most important thing. Peace is not the most important thing. Do you know that some people in the Soviet Union, parts of the Soviet Union, were the most peaceful places in history? Why? Because there was no freedom. The government controlled practically everything they did. Yeah, they limited crime, but they also had no freedom of speech, no freedom of expression, no freedom to, make their own business. And they were all poor. Peace is not what we're going for. You can have peace with an authoritarian dictator who controls everything. It's not about peace. Let's imagine that nationalized healthcare, let's imagine that it works. It's proven that it won't, but let's just pretend that it works, that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. In order for it to work, they have to take away some of your liberty. Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, Mike? Well, they will have to pass laws, which they've already said they're going to do, pass laws that require you to have health insurance. Require you. You have no choice. You have to buy it. That takes away some of your liberty. They will pass laws that regulate what you eat, what you can drink, how much you exercise, if you can smoke. Some people like to smoke cigars. Nope, no smoking cigars. If you do, taxed heavily. Oh, if you eat fast food, taxed heavily. Oh, if you don't exercise, taxed heavily.